The world has gone quiet. Shadows stretch across the walls. Let your thoughts grow soft. A story awaits in the stillness. If it brings you peace, like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a night. Now let the story find you. The wind carried a lonesome tune across the prairie, whistling through the skeletal remains of an old mining town called Hollow Bell. Tumbleweeds rolled lazily past crumbling storefronts, their wooden signs creaking on rusted hinges. The sun hung low, painting the sky in hues of amber and bruised purple, as if it, too, was weary of this forgotten place. In the distance, a faint chime rang out, soft and mournful, like a whisper from the earth itself. The bell tower, long abandoned, stood crooked at the edge of town, its iron bell swaying gently, though no hand touched its rope. Clara Beaumont stepped off the stagecoach, her boots sinking into the dust. She was 25, with sharp green eyes and a heart that beat too fast for her own good. She'd come to Hollow Bell, chasing a rumor, a half-whispered tale from a saloon in Cheyenne about a bell that rang for lost souls. Clara wasn't one for ghost stories, but she was one for answers. Her brother, Elias, had vanished here 3 years ago, leaving nothing but a scrawled letter promising riches from a silver vein. Now she was here to find him, or at least the truth of what happened. The town felt like it was holding its breath. Clara adjusted the brim of her hat, her fingers brushing the revolver at her hip. She wasn't fool enough to walk into a place like this unarmed. The stagecoach driver, an old man with a face like cracked leather, had warned her. "Ain't no one stays in Hollow Bell after dark," he'd said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "That bell don't ring for the living." Clara had nodded, but her stubborn streak was wider than the Wyoming plains. She wasn't leaving until she knew. The saloon was the only building with a flicker of life. Its windows glowed faintly, and a low murmur of voices spilled out as she pushed through the swinging doors. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale whiskey and unwashed men. A handful of patrons glanced her way, their eyes lingering too long. Clara ignored them, striding to the bar where a woman with gray-streaked hair was wiping down glasses. "Evening," Clara said, her voice steady but soft. "I'm looking for someone who knows about this town, about the bell." The barkeep, who introduced herself as Maud, raised an eyebrow. "You're chasing that old tale, are you? Most folks who come asking about the bell don't stay long." Her voice was low, like she was sharing a secret with the shadows. "What's your stake in it, girl?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the bar. "My brother, Elias Beaumont. He was here 3 years back. Never came home." Maud's expression softened, but there was something guarded in her eyes. "Lots of men came through chasing silver. Lots of them never left. That bell, it's got a way of calling to folks who are lost. Not just in body, mind you, in spirit." Clara leaned closer, her voice dropping. "You saying it's cursed?" Maud chuckled, but it was a dry, uneasy sound. "Cursed? Maybe. Or maybe it just knows too much. Rings when someone's soul ain't at peace. Been ringing more lately." She paused, glancing toward the saloon doors. "You planning to stay the night?" Clara nodded, though the weight of the town was already settling on her shoulders. Maud pointed her to a boarding house down the street, run by a man named Jonah Tate. "He's a bit odd," Maud warned, "but he's got rooms. Just Don't go wandering when that bell starts up. The boarding house was a sagging two-story building, its porch slanting like a tired smile. Jonah Tate greeted her at the door, a tall man with a gaunt face and eyes that seemed to look right through her. He was polite enough, offering her a room for $1 a night, but his hands trembled as he handed her the key. "Don't mind the noises," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Old places like this, they talk." Clara's room was small, with a creaky bed and a single window overlooking the bell tower. She set her satchel down, pulling out Elias's letter. The paper was worn thin from her reading it over and over. "Asterisk, I found something, Clara. Something big. The bell knows. It's calling me, asterisk." The words made her stomach twist. What had he found? And why did it feel like the town itself was watching her? That night, as the moon rose pale and thin, the bell chimed again. Slow, deliberate, each note hanging in the air like a question. Clara sat up in bed, her heart pounding. The sound wasn't loud, but it was heavy, like it carried the weight of every soul that had ever mourned. She pulled on her boots and crept to the window. The tower was dark, but the bell swayed gently, as if stirred by an unseen hand. Downstairs she heard a door creak open, then footsteps on the porch. Jonah's voice drifted up, low and urgent, speaking to someone she couldn't see. "It's her, ain't it? She's the one it's calling now." Clara froze, her breath catching. Who was he talking to? And why did it feel like the bell was ringing for her? Clara's boots made no sound as she eased down the stairs, her hand hovering near the revolver at her hip. The boarding house was dark, the only light coming from a sliver of moonlight slicing through a cracked window. Jonah's voice had faded, but the echo of his words clung to her like damp cloth. "She's the one it's calling now." The bell's chime still lingered in the air, soft but insistent, pulling at something deep in her chest. She didn't believe in ghosts, not really, but Hollow Bell had a way of making skepticism feel like a flimsy shield. The parlor was empty when she reached it, the front door slightly ajar. A cold draft curled through the gap, carrying the scent of dust and sagebrush. Clara peered out, squinting into the night. The street was deserted, the town swallowed by shadows, but the bell tower loomed in the distance, its silhouette sharp against the starry sky. No one was there. No Jonah, no stranger. Just the bell swaying faintly, though the air was still. She stepped onto the porch, her breath visible in the chill. The town felt alive in a way it hadn't during the day, as if the darkness had woken something. She shook off the thought and moved toward the saloon, hoping Maud might still be awake. If anyone knew what Jonah was muttering about, it'd be her. The saloon's windows were dark now, but a faint glow flickered from a back room. Clara knocked softly, then pushed the door open when no one answered. "Maud?" Her voice was a whisper, swallowed by the creak of the floorboards. The bar was empty, glasses lined up like soldiers on the counter. A single lantern burned low in the corner, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Clara's eyes caught on something etched into the bar, a crude carving of a bell with a crack running through it. She traced it with her finger, unease prickling her skin. It looked old, worn smooth by years of hands brushing over it. A floorboard groaned behind her. Clara spun her hand on her revolver, but it was only Maud, stepping out from the back room with a shawl draped over her shoulders. "You're up late, girl," Maud said, her voice calm but her eyes sharp. "Belle woke you, didn't it?" Clara nodded, relaxing her grip. "Heard Jonah talking outside my window. Said something about the bell calling for me. You know what he meant?" Maud's face tightened just for a moment before she busied herself with a rag, wiping down the already clean bar. "Jonah's got a head full of ghosts. Always has. This town does that to folks. Max and hear things, see things." She paused, her eyes flicking to the carved bell. "But he ain't wrong about the bell. It's been ringing more since you got here." Clara's stomach twisted. "You saying it's because of me?" "I'm saying it knows you're looking for something." Maud set the rag down and leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Hollow bells got secrets, Clara. Most of them are buried out past the tower in the old silver mine. Folks say the bell rings for those who get too close to the truth." Clara thought of Elias's letter, the scrawled words about a silver vein and the bell. "My brother was out there, wasn't he?" "At the mine." Maud's lips pressed into a thin line. "Lots of men went to that mine. Not many came back. The ones who did, they weren't right. Talked about voices in the dark, shadows that moved without light. If your brother was chasing silver, that's where he'd have gone." Clara's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "I need to see it." "The mine." Maud shook her head. "Not tonight, you don't. That place ain't safe after dark. Wait for morning and take someone with you. Someone who knows the way." "Who?" Clara asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Jonah," Maud said reluctantly. "He's been here longer than most. Knows the mine better than anyone still breathing. But be careful. He's tied to this place. More than he lets on." Clara wanted to press her, but the weight of Maud's words felt like a warning. She thanked her and stepped back into the night, the bell's chime echoing faintly as she returned to the boarding house. Jonah was in the parlor now, sitting by a dying fire, his hands folded like he was praying. He didn't look up as she entered, but his voice was low and steady. "You heard it, didn't you? The bell." She stopped, her hand on the stair rail. "I heard you too. Talking about me. Who was out there with you?" Jonah's eyes flicked to her, dark and unreadable. "No one you'd want to meet. Not yet." He stood, his shadow stretching across the floor. "If you're going to the mine, I'll take you. But you won't like what you find." Clara's throat tightened, but she nodded. "Morning, then." Back in her room, she sat on the bed, Elias's letter in her hands. The bell chimed again, softer now, like a lullaby for the lost. She didn't sleep. The town was too quiet, the silence too heavy, as if it was waiting for her to make the next move. She thought of Elias, his crooked smile, his promises of a better life. She thought of the mine, the shadows Maud had described. And she thought of Jonah, his trembling hands and cryptic words. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in pale gold, Clara made a decision. She'd go to the mine with Jonah, but she'd keep her eyes open. Hollow Bell was hiding something, and the bell's chime was starting to feel less like a warning and more like an invitation. The morning sun barely warmed the air as Clara stepped out of the boarding house, her satchel slung over her shoulder. Hollow Bell looked even more desolate in daylight, its buildings sagging like they'd given up on standing tall. The bell tower cast a long shadow across the street, and though the bell was silent now, its presence lingered like a half-remembered dream. Clara's eyes scanned the town, searching for Jonah. He was waiting by the saloon, leaning against a hitching post, his hat pulled low. He looked older in the light, his face carved with lines that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "Ready?" Jonah asked, his voice rough but steady. He didn't meet her gaze, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the silver mine waited. Clara nodded, adjusting the revolver at her hip. "How far is it?" "Hour's walk," he said, already moving. "Stay close. The prairie plays tricks out there." They left the town behind, following a faint trail that wound through brittle grass and jagged rocks. The wind carried a low moan, like the land itself was grieving. Clara kept her questions to herself, watching Jonah's hunched shoulders, the way his hands twitched at his sides. He hadn't said much since last night, but his words about the mine echoed in her mind. "You won't like what you find." She thought of Elias, his letter tucked safely in her satchel, and steeled herself. Whatever was out there, she'd face it. The trail led them to a low ridge, where the mouth of the silver mine gaped like a wound in the earth. Its timbers were weathered, some splintered, as if the mine had tried to swallow itself. A rusted cart track disappeared into the darkness, and the air carried a faint metallic tang. Clara's heart quickened, but she kept her face calm. "This is it?" Jonah nodded, his eyes darting to the mine's entrance. "Been closed since the vein dried up. Or so they say." He paused, his voice dropping. "Truth is, folks stopped going in after the accidents. Too many men went down and never came up." Clara's thoughts flickered to Elias. "Accidents?" Jonah's jaw tightened. "Cave-ins. Bad air. Some said it was more than that. Shadows that didn't belong. Voices calling their names?" He glanced at her, his eyes dark. "Your brother, he was one of the last to try his luck here." Clara's chest tightened, but she pushed past it. "Show me where." Jonah hesitated, then pulled a lantern from his pack and lit it. The flame cast a weak glow as they stepped into the mine. The air grew heavy, pressing against Clara's skin, and the temperature dropped with every step. The tunnel walls were rough, scarred by pickaxes, and the ground crunched underfoot. Jonah moved slowly, his lantern swaying, throwing shadows that seemed to twist and stretch beyond their reach. They hadn't gone far when Clara noticed something carved into the wall, a crude bell like the one in the saloon. She stopped, her fingers brushing the etching. "What's this?" Jonah didn't look back. Miner's mark. They thought it'd protect him. Didn't do much good. Clara frowned, her unease growing. The carving felt wrong, like it was watching her. She shook off the thought and hurried to catch up. The tunnel sloped downward, branching into smaller passages. Jonah chose one without hesitation, his steps sure despite the darkness. Clara's hand rested on her revolver, more for comfort than necessity. The mine was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. It felt like it was waiting. They reached a wider chamber, its ceiling propped by sagging beams. Scattered tools lay abandoned, their handles rotted, and a pile of rocks blocked one side, as if a collapse had sealed it off. Jonah set the lantern down, its light barely reaching the edges of the room. "This is where they found the last vein," he said, his voice low, "and where most of the trouble started." Clara's eyes scanned the chamber, searching for any sign of Elias. Her gaze landed on a glint in the dirt, half buried near the rock pile. She knelt, brushing away the dust, and her breath caught. It was a pocket watch, its silver case tarnished, but intact. She pried it open, her fingers trembling. Inside, a faded photograph showed a young man with a crooked smile. Elias. This was his, she whispered, her voice breaking. She looked up at Jonah, her heart pounding. He was here. What happened to him? Jonah's face was unreadable, but his hands clenched at his sides. I told you, Clara. This place takes what it wants. Your brother, he got too close to something he shouldn't have. Something? Clara stood, her voice sharp. Don't talk in riddles, Jonah. What did he find? Jonah opened his mouth, but a low rumble cut him off. The ground trembled, dust sifting from the ceiling. Clara froze, her hand on her revolver as the sound grew louder, like a heartbeat pulsing through the earth. The lantern flickered, its flame guttering, and for a moment the chamber was plunged into near darkness. When the light steadied, Jonah was staring at the rock pile, his face pale. We need to go, he said, his voice urgent. Now. Clara clutched the pocket watch, her mind racing. She wanted to dig through the rocks to search for more, but the mind felt alive now, its walls closing in. She nodded, following Jonah as he grabbed the lantern and hurried back the way they'd come. The rumble faded, but the air grew heavier, and Clara swore she heard a whisper, faint and fleeting, calling her name. They emerged into daylight, gasping, the mind's darkness clinging to them like damp cloth. Clara looked back at the entrance, the pocket watch heavy in her hand. Elias had been here, and something had taken him. She turned to Jonah, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. You know more than you're saying. Tonight, you're telling me everything. Jonah met her gaze, his eyes haunted. You might wish I hadn't. The sun was dipping below the horizon as Clara and Jonah trudged back into Hollow Bell, the town bathed in a soft, fading glow. The air felt heavy, like it carried the weight of the mind's secrets. Clara's hand was still wrapped around Elias's pocket watch, its cold metal grounding her as her mind churned. The whisper she'd heard in the mine clung to her thoughts, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't just her imagination. Something in that darkness had known her name. She glanced at Jonah, his face drawn, his eyes avoiding hers. He'd promised answers, and she wasn't letting him slip away. They reached the boarding house, its sagging porch creaking under their steps. Inside, the parlor was dim, the fire reduced to glowing embers. Jonah sank into a chair, his hands restless, while Clara stood by the window, watching the bell tower's silhouette against the twilight. The bell was silent now, but its presence loomed, like a heartbeat paused, but not stopped. She turned to Jonah, her voice firm. You said you'd talk. So talk. Jonah rubbed his face, his fingers lingering on the lines etched deep around his eyes. Ain't an easy story, Clara, and it ain't one you'll like hearing. He leaned forward, his voice low, as if the walls might listen. That mine, it's more than just a hole in the ground. It's got a pull like it calls to folks who are hurting, folks who've lost something. Clara's grip on the pocket watch tightened. Like Elias. Jonah nodded, his eyes distant. Like Elias. Like me. Like half the men who came to Hollow Bell chasing silver. Most of them were running from something. Debts, broken hearts, bad choices. The mind promised answers, riches, a way out. But it don't give without taking. Clara sat across from him, her heart pounding. What did it take from Elias? Jonah's gaze flicked to the window, then back to her. 3 years ago, a group of miners, your brother included, found a new vein. Deepest one yet. They were hauling out silver like it was water, but they started hearing things. Whispers. Names. Some saw shadows moving in the tunnels, shapes that didn't match no man. Elias, he was different. Kept saying the bell was talking to him, telling him secrets. Clara's breath caught, her mind flashing to his letter. Asterisk, the bell knows. What secrets? Jonah shook his head. He wouldn't say, but he kept going back, deeper each time. One night he didn't come up. The others said the tunnel collapsed, buried him. They tried digging, but the mine, it wouldn't let in. Rocks kept falling like it was protecting something. Clara's chest ached, but she kept her voice steady. You think he's still down there? Jonah's eyes darkened. I think the mine don't let go of what it claims. But that bell, it's been ringing for you, Clara. Ever since you stepped into town. That ain't normal. She leaned forward, her voice sharp. Why me? I'm not chasing silver. I just want my brother. Jonah's hands trembled, and he clasped them together to still them. Maybe it ain't about what you want. Maybe it's about what you carry. Grief. Questions. The bell feels that. It always has. Clara wanted to argue, to say she didn't believe in haunted bells or cursed mines, but the weight of the pocket watch in her hand felt like proof of something she couldn't name. She stood, pacing to the window. The town was quiet, the stars bright overhead, but the silence felt alive, watching. You were out there last night, she said, turning back to Jonah. Talking to someone. Who was it? Jonah's face paled, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Just someone who knows the town's history, he said finally. Name's Caleb. Used to work the mine with me. He don't come around much anymore. Clara frowned. Why is he hiding? He ain't hiding, Jonah said, too quickly. He just keeps to himself. You'll meet him if he wants you to. She didn't like the dodge, but pushing Jonah felt like pushing a wall. Instead, she changed tack. Tomorrow, I'm going back to the mine. I found Elias's watch. There might be more. Jonah's eyes widened. You can't. Not alone. That place? It's awake now. You felt it today, didn't you? The rumble. The whispers. Clara's skin prickled, but she held his gaze. I'm not leaving until I know what happened to him. You can come with me, or I'll go alone. Jonah stared at her, his expression a mix of fear and resignation. Fine, but we go prepared. Lanterns, rope, picks, and we don't stay past noon. The mine's worse when the sun's low. Clara nodded, though her stomach twisted at the thought of returning to that darkness. She climbed the stairs to her room, the pocket watch still in her hand. Sitting on the bed, she opened it again, staring at Elias's photograph. His smile was so familiar, yet so distant, like a memory she could only half grasp. She traced the cracked glass, her throat tight. What did you find down there? She whispered. That night, the bell chimed again, slow and mournful, each note sinking into her bones. She lay awake, listening, as the sound wove through her thoughts. It wasn't just a bell. It was a voice calling her back to the mine, to the truth. And somewhere in that truth was Elias, or whatever was left of him. As sleep finally pulled at her, Clara made a silent vow. She'd face the mine, the bell, the whispers. She'd find her brother, or she'd make Hollow Bell answer for taking him. The dawn broke cold and gray over Hollow Bell, the sky heavy with clouds that seemed to press down on the town. Clara stood outside the boarding house, her satchel heavier now with rope and a small pickaxe Jonah had insisted she carry. Her fingers brushed the pocket watch tucked in her coat, its weight a constant reminder of why she was here. The bell tower loomed in the distance, silent but watchful, its iron bell still as if holding its breath. Jonah joined her, his face grim, a lantern in one hand and a coiled rope slung over his shoulder. He didn't speak, just nodded toward the trail leading to the mine. The walk was quieter than the day before, the prairie hushed under the overcast sky. Clara's boots crunched against the dry earth, each step echoing the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. She glanced at Jonah, his eyes fixed ahead, his jaw tight. "You said the mine's worse when the sun's low," she said, breaking the silence. "Why?" Jonah's steps slowed, but he didn't look at her. Light keeps things at bay. Shadows get bold when it's dark. You felt it yesterday. That rumble wasn't just the earth settling. Clara's skin prickled, the memory of the whisper in the mine creeping back. She wanted to call it nonsense, but the pocket watch in her coat felt heavier with every step. "You believe the mine's alive, don't you?" Jonah's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Alive? Maybe. Or maybe it's just holding on to something that don't want to let go. Either way, it knows we're coming." They reached the mine's entrance, its dark mouth unchanged from the day before. The air was colder here, carrying a faint metallic tang that made Clara's throat tighten. Jonah lit the lantern, its flame casting a feeble glow against the tunnel walls. "Stay close," he said, his voice low. "And if you hear anything, don't answer." Clara nodded, her hand resting on her revolver as they stepped inside. The mine swallowed the daylight, the lantern's light barely pushing back the darkness. The walls seemed closer today, the air thicker, like it was resisting their presence. They followed the same path as before, past the carved bell on the wall, its jagged lines seeming to shift in the flickering light. Clara's eyes lingered on it, a shiver running through her. It looked different, as if the crack had deepened overnight. They reached the chamber with the rock pile, the air heavy with dust and silence. Clara's gaze went to the spot where she'd found Elias's watch. She knelt, setting her satchel down, and began sifting through the dirt. "He was here," she said, more to herself than Jonah. "There's got to be something else." Jonah stood by the entrance, his lantern raised, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Be quick. This place don't like us poking around." Clara's fingers brushed something hard beneath the dirt. She dug carefully, revealing a small leather journal, its pages yellowed and edges frayed. Her heart leaped as she opened it, recognizing Elias's handwriting. The entries were short, frantic, scrawled in fading ink. Asterisk, the bell won't stop. It knows what we found. It's not silver. It's something older. Her hands trembled as she read on. Asterisk, Caleb says we shouldn't touch it, but the others won't listen. It's calling us. "Caleb?" Clara looked up at Jonah, her voice sharp. Your friend. He was with Elias. Jonah's face went still, his eyes darting to the journal. Keep reading, he said, his voice tight. Clara flipped to the last page. Asterisk, I saw it tonight, in the deepest tunnel. It's not a vein. It's a door. The bell's louder now. It's angry. Asterisk. The words stopped there, the rest of the page blank. Clara's chest tightened, her mind racing. A door? What had Elias found? She stood, clutching the journal, and turned to Jonah. What's down there? What's he talking about? Jonah's gaze was fixed on the rock pile, his hands shaking. I told you, Clara. The mind takes what it wants. Elias, he found something he shouldn't have. Before she could press him, a low hum filled the chamber, like the air itself was vibrating. The lantern flickered, shadows twisting along the walls. Clara froze, her hand on her revolver, as the hum grew into a whisper, soft and indistinct, weaving through the darkness. It calls her name, not once, but twice, each syllable curling around her like smoke. She stepped back, her heart pounding. Did you hear that? Jonah's face was pale, his eyes wide. I told you not to answer. I didn't, she snapped, but her voice wavered. The whisper came again, fainter now, from the rock pile. Clara's eyes locked on it, her pulse racing. Something was behind those rocks, something Elias had seen. She grabbed the pickaxe, her hands steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. Help me move these. Jonah shook his head, stepping back. You don't know what you're doing. That's where it happened. The collapse. It's sealed for a reason. Clara ignored him, swinging the pickaxe against the rocks. The clatter echoed, sharp and jarring, but she didn't stop. Elias is in there, or answers are. I'm not leaving until I know. Jonah grabbed her arm, his grip tight. You'll wake it, Clara. You don't know what's down there. She yanked free, her eyes blazing. Then tell me, what's behind this? What's the door? Jonah's mouth opened, but the ground trembled before he could speak, a low rumble that shook dust from the ceiling. The whisper grew louder, not one voice but many, overlapping, calling her name. Clara stumbled back, the pickaxe slipping from her hands. The lantern went out, plunging them into darkness, and for a moment she swore she saw a shadow move, tall and thin, at the edge of. When the lantern flared back to life, Jonah was already pulling her toward the tunnel. We're leaving. Now. Clara clutched the journal, her mind spinning, but she followed, the whispers fading as they stumbled toward daylight. Outside, the air felt clean, sharp, but the weight of the mine clung to her. She turned to Jonah, her voice low. Tomorrow we're coming back, and you're telling me about Caleb. No more secrets. Jonah's eyes were haunted, but he nodded. Tomorrow. But you might wish you'd left it alone. Clara sat by the small window in the boarding house, the journal open on her lap, its pages bathed in the faint silver of moonlight. The town was still, the bells silent, but the whispers from the mine echoed in her mind, soft and persistent, like ripples on a pond. Elias's words haunted her. A door, something older than silver, and Caleb, a name that seemed to Jonah's secrets. She traced the journal's final entry, her fingers lingering on the jagged ink. It's angry. The words felt alive as if they carried the mind's pulse. She closed the journal, trying to quiet her thoughts, but sleep wouldn't come. Downstairs, the parlor was dark when she descended, her boots barely touching the creaky floorboards. Jonah wasn't there, but a faint creak from the porch drew her attention. She eased the door open, her hand hovering near her revolver, and found Jonah sitting in the rocking chair, staring at the night. His hands were clasped, his knuckles pale, as if he was holding on to something to keep from drifting away. The air was cool, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain. "You're up late," Clara said, her voice low, settling into the chair beside him. Jonah didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the bell tower's silhouette. "Couldn't sleep." "Never do, not when the bell's been ringing like it has." Clara leaned forward, her gaze steady. "You owe me answers, Jonah. About Caleb. About what Elias found. No more dodging." Jonah's shoulders sagged, like the weight of years was pressing down. He rubbed his face, his voice rough when he finally spoke. "Caleb was my brother, younger by 2 years. Came to Hollow Bell with me, chasing the same dreams as your Elias. Silver, a new start. We worked the mine together till things went wrong." Clara's breath caught, but she kept silent, letting him continue. 3 years ago, same time Elias was here, we hit that deep vein," Jonah said, his eyes distant. "But it wasn't just silver. There was something else down in the lowest tunnel. A slab of stone, carved with symbols none of us could read. Looked like a door, sealed tight. Caleb, he was curious like your brother. Kept going back, sketching it, trying to figure it out. Said it felt like it was calling him." Clara's mind flashed to Elias's journal. "It's a door, asterisk. What was it?" Jonah shook his head. "Don't know. But it changed folks. The miners who saw it started acting strange. Hearing voices, seeing shadows. Caleb said the bell was tied to it, that it rang when the door was angry. Then came the collapse. Tunnel caved in, took Elias and a few others. Caleb, he made it out, but he wasn't the same. Left town soon after. Ain't been right since." Clara's heart pounded, her fingers tightening around the journal in her lap. "Where is he now?" Jonah's eyes flicked to her, dark and wary. "Around. He comes back sometimes when the bell calls. Keeps to the shadows, says it's safer that way. He warned me about you, Clara. Said the bell's ringing 'cause you're stirring things up like Elias did." Clara's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not leaving till I know what happened to my brother. If Caleb knows something, I need to talk to him." Jonah's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "I'll try to find him. But he don't trust easy, not anymore. And Clara, that door, whatever it is, it's still down there. You keep digging. You might open something you can't close." The warning hung in the air, heavy as the clouds overhead. Clara wanted to push, to demand more, but Jonah's haunted look stopped her. She stood, the journal pressed to her chest. "Tomorrow we're going back to the mine. I need to see that door." Jonah didn't argue, just stared at the bell tower as if it held all the answers. Clara returned to her room, the journal's weight grounding her as she lay down. She didn't open it again, afraid of what else she might find. The bell chimed once, soft and mournful, its note lingering like a sigh. She closed her eyes, the whisper from the mine weaving through her dreams, calling her deeper. Morning came too soon, the sky still gray but lighter now. Clara met Jonah outside, their supplies ready, their faces set. The walk to the mine was silent, the prairie stretching endless around them. The entrance waited, its darkness unchanged, but Clara felt its pull stronger today, like a tide drawing her in. Jonah lit the lantern, his hands steadier than the night before, and they stepped inside. The tunnel felt tighter, the air colder, as if the mine was closing around them. They passed the carved bell, its crack seeming wider, almost pulsing in the lantern's glow. Clara's eyes lingered on it, her unease growing, but she kept moving, the journal and her satchel a silent promise to Elias. They reached the chamber with the rock pile, the air thick with dust and something heavier, like anticipation. Clara set her satchel down, her pickaxe in hand. "We're clearing these rocks," she said, her voice firm. "I need to see what's behind them." Jonah hesitated, his lantern casting long shadows. "You sure about this, Clara? Once you see it, there's no going back." She met his gaze, her heart steady despite the fear. "I'm sure." They worked together, the clatter of rocks echoing in the chamber. Each stone felt heavier than the last, like the mine was resisting. Clara's arms ached, but she didn't stop, driven by the journal's words, by Elias's smile in the pocket watch. The pile shrank, revealing a narrow gap, just wide enough to slip through. Beyond it, the darkness was deeper, colder, like it swallowed the lantern's light. Clara peered through, her breath catching. The tunnel continued, sloping downward, and at its end, a faint shape loomed, a stone slab, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to twist and shimmer. The door. Her pulse raced, the whispers from yesterday returning, louder now, weaving her name like a lullaby. Jonah grabbed her shoulder, his voice urgent. "That's far enough. We ain't going closer." Clara turned to him, her eyes blazing. "That's where Elias was. I'm not stopping now." Jonah's face was pale, but before he could speak, a shadow moved behind them, swift and silent, vanishing into the tunnel. Clara's hand went to her revolver, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called, her voice echoed unanswered. Jonah's eyes were wide, his voice barely a whisper. "Caleb." The air in the mine grew colder, the lantern's flame flickering as Clara's eyes darted to the tunnel where the shadow had vanished. Her hand stayed on her revolver, her pulse a steady drumbeat against the silence. The name Caleb hung heavy, Jonah's whisper echoing in the chamber like a confession. The stone door loomed at the tunnel's end, its carved symbols catching the light in ways that made them seem to pulse, as if the mine itself was breathing. Clara's grip tightened, the journal in her satchel a weight pulling her forward, toward answers, toward Elias. "Who's there?" She called again, her voice sharp but steady, cutting through the dark. No answer came, only the faint scrape of boots on stone, retreating deeper into the tunnel. Jonah's face was pale, his lantern trembling in his hand, casting jagged shadows across the rock pile. "It's him," Jonah said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the mine's oppressive quiet. "Caleb. He's been watching us." Clara's eyes narrowed, her mind racing. "Your brother, the one who worked with Elias? Why is he hiding?" Jonah shook his head, his gaze flicking to the stone door. "He ain't hiding, not exactly. He's drawn to this place like it won't let him go. Ever since the collapse, he's been different. Says the door talks to him, tells him things. I thought he was crazy, but after what you heard, I ain't so sure." Clara's stomach twisted, the memory of the whispers curling through her thoughts. Her name spoken by voices that weren't there. She stepped toward the gap in the rock pile, her boots crunching on loose gravel. "We're finding him. Now." Jonah grabbed her arm, his grip firm but shaking. "Clara, you don't know what you're walking into. That door, it's not just stone. It's something else. Caleb said it wants something, and you're giving it a reason to wake up." She yanked free, her eyes blazing. "If Caleb knows what happened to Elias, I'm not leaving till I talk to him. You can stay here or come with me." Jonah's jaw clenched, but he nodded, his lantern raised as he followed her through the gap. The tunnel beyond was narrower, the walls slick with damp, the air heavy with a metallic tang that clung to Clara's throat. The stone door was closer now, its symbols sharper, swirling in patterns that made her head ache if she stared too long. The whispers returned, softer this time, weaving through the darkness like threads of smoke, calling her name, calling Elias's. They moved slowly, the lantern's light barely reaching the tunnel's edges. Clara's hand stayed near her revolver, her other clutching the journal through her satchel. Every step felt like defiance, like the mind was watching, waiting for her to falter. The sound of boots came again, faint but deliberate, just beyond the light's reach. Clara's heart pounded, but she kept moving, driven by the thought of Elias, of the door he'd written about. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, the stone door dominating one wall. It was massive, taller than Clara, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift and twist, like ripples in water. At its base a figure crouched, his back to them, his hands tracing the carvings. He was thin, his coat tattered, his hair long and matted. Clara's breath caught as he turned, his face half lit by the lantern. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale, but there was something familiar in his features, like a shadow of Jonah's. "Caleb," Jonah said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Caleb stood, his movements slow, deliberate, like he was part of the mine itself. His eyes locked on Clara, sharp and unblinking, as if he could see through her. "You brought her," he said, his voice low, raspy, like it hadn't been used in years. "The bell's been ringing for her." Clara's skin prickled, but she held his gaze. "You knew my brother, Elias Beaumont. What happened to him?" Caleb's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Elias, he was like you, too stubborn, asked too many questions. Found this." He gestured to the door, his fingers lingering on a symbol that looked like a cracked bell. He thought it was a way to riches, but it's more than that. It's a lock, and he tried to open it. Clara's heart raced, her hand tightening on the journal. "What's behind it?" Caleb's eyes darkened, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Answers. Truths. Things that don't belong here. Elias saw it and it took him. The mind don't let go of what it claims." Jonah stepped forward, his voice urgent. "Caleb, stop this. Come back with us. You don't need to stay here." Caleb laughed, a dry, hollow sound that echoed off the walls. "You think I chose this? The door knows me, Jonah. Knows you, too. And now it knows her." He pointed at Clara, his finger trembling. "You should have left when you had the chance." Clara's chest tightened, but she stepped closer, her voice steady. "I'm not leaving till I know what happened to Elias. If you won't tell me, I'll find out myself." Caleb's eyes narrowed, and for a moment she thought he'd lunge at her. But he stepped back, his hands raised, as if warding off something unseen. "You want to know? Look at the door. Really look. It'll show you." Clara turned to the stone slab, her breath shallow. The symbols seemed to move, curling like smoke, forming shapes that tugged at her memory. Faces, voices, Alias's smile. The whispers grew louder, her name woven through them, pulling her closer. She reached out, her fingers inches from the stone, when Jonah grabbed her, yanking her back. "Don't," he hissed, his eyes wide. "You touch it. You're giving it what it wants." Clara stumbled, her hand falling to her side, the whispers fading but not gone. Caleb watched, his expression unreadable, then turned and slipped into the shadows, his footsteps fading down a side tunnel. Clara started after him, but Jonah held her arm, his grip like iron. "Let him go," Jonah said, his voice shaking. "He's not himself. Not anymore." Clara's eyes burned, her mind spinning with Caleb's words, Elias's journal, the door's pull. She looked back at the stone slab, its symbols still now, but the air around it felt alive, waiting. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice low but firm, "we're coming back, and we're opening that door." Jonah's face was grim, but he didn't argue. As they left the mine, the whispers followed, faint and fleeting, like a promise of what waited below. The night wrapped Hollow Bell in a heavy quiet, the kind that made every creak of the boarding house feel like a warning. Clara sat on her bed, Elias's journal open before her, its pages worn from her restless fingers. The lantern on the bedside table cast a soft glow, flickering as if unsure of itself. Caleb's words echoed in her mind, sharp and unsettling. Asterisk, the door knows her. She traced the last entry in the journal, Elias's handwriting jagged, and hurried. "It's a lock." The stone door in the mine, with its twisting symbols, felt closer now, like it was watching her even here, miles from its cold embrace. The bell chimed once, low and mournful, its note sinking into her bones. She hadn't seen Jonah since they'd returned from the mine. He'd muttered something about checking the town and vanished into the dusk, his face pale, his eyes haunted by Caleb's sudden appearance. Clara didn't trust his silence, but she couldn't wait for him to decide to talk. The door was the key. She was sure of it. Elias had seen it, touched it, and it had taken him. Tomorrow she'd go back, with or without Jonah. But tonight, she needed to understand what she was facing. Clara slipped downstairs, her boots soft on the creaky steps, and headed for the saloon. Maud would know something, she reasoned. The barkeep had lived in Hollow Bell too long not to. The saloon was dark, its windows black, but a faint light glowed from the back room. Clara knocked lightly, then pushed the door open, finding Maud at the bar, sorting bottles by lamplight. The older woman looked up, her gray-streaked hair loose, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. "You're restless tonight," Maud said, setting a bottle down. "Bell's got you, don't it?" Clara slid onto a stool, her hands clasped to still their trembling. "I found something in the mine. A journal. Elias's. He wrote about a door, a stone slab with symbols. Caleb mentioned it too. Said it's a lock? What is it, Maud?" Maud's face tightened, her fingers pausing on the rag she'd picked up. She glanced at the carved bell on the bar, its crack seeming deeper in the dim light. "You've been digging where you shouldn't," she said, her voice low. "That door's older than this town, older than the mine. Folks say it was here before the first settlers, buried deep. Miners found it when they dug too far, and it changed everything." Clara leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Changed how?" Maud's eyes flicked to the saloon doors, as if expecting someone to walk through. Hollow Bell was thriving once. Silver flowing, folks dreaming big. Then they found that door. Men started hearing things, seeing things. Shadows that moved on their own. Voices calling their names. The bells started ringing, not just at funerals, but every night. Miners who went near that door, they didn't come back right. Some didn't come back at all. Clara's thoughts raced to Elias, to his frantic journal entries. "My brother saw it. He wrote about it. Said it was angry." Maud nodded, her expression grim. "It don't like being disturbed. That door's got a hold on this place, on the bell, on the souls who get too close. Caleb was one-off gem. He's still here, ain't he?" Clara's chest tightened. "He was in the mine today. Said the door knows me." "What does that mean?" Maud's hands stilled, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It means you're tied to this now, Clara. Like Elias. Like Caleb. The door feels what you carry, your grief, your need for answers. It'll keep calling till you answer or walk away." Clara's fingers brushed the pocket watch in her coat, its weight grounding her. "I'm not walking away. I need to know what happened to him." Maud sighed, her eyes softening. "Then you better be ready for what you find. That door ain't just a door. It's a choice. Open it, and you might not like what's on the other side." Clara wanted to ask more, but a creak outside the saloon made her pause. She glanced at the door, her hand instinctively moving to her revolver. Maud noticed her own hand slipping beneath the bar, likely to a weapon of her own. "Who's there?" Clara called, her voice steady despite the unease coiling in her gut. No answer came, but the creak came again, closer now, like footsteps on the porch. Clara stood, her eyes locked on the door when it swung open, revealing Jonah. His face was ashen, his coat dusted with dirt, as if he'd been out in the prairie. "Clara," he said, his voice rough, "we need to talk. Now." Maud raised an eyebrow, but stayed silent as Clara followed Jonah outside. The night was cold, the bell tower a dark shape against the stars. Jonah stopped by the hitching post, his hands twitching. "I found Caleb," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's at the old church, by the bell tower. Says he'll talk, but only to you." Clara's pulse quickened, her mind flashing to Caleb's hollow eyes, his cryptic words in the mine. "Why me?" Jonah's gaze dropped, his voice heavy. "He says the door chose you. Says it's been waiting for someone like you since Elias." Clara's throat tightened, but she nodded. "Take me to him." They moved through the town, the streets empty, the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of tumbleweeds. The church was a crumbling relic, its steeple leaning, the bell tower rising beside it, like a sentinel. Caleb stood at its base, his figure half lost in shadow, his eyes glinting as Clara approached. He didn't move, but his voice was low, almost reverent. "You saw it, didn't you? The door. It's calling you like it called him." Clara stepped closer, her hand on the journal and her satchel. "What's behind it, Caleb? What took my brother?" Caleb's lips curled, a ghost of a smile. Truth, pain, everything he wanted and couldn't have. You'll see, Clara. Tomorrow, when you go back, the door's ready for you. Before she could respond, Caleb slipped into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as he'd appeared. Clara turned to Jonah, her voice sharp. He's not telling me everything. Neither are you. Jonah's eyes were haunted, but he nodded. Tomorrow we'll face it together. The door, the mine, all of it. But Clara, be sure you're ready. As they walked back to the boarding house, the bell chimed again, its note lingering in the night, pulling Clara closer to the truth she both craved and feared. The morning air was sharp, cutting through Clara's coat as she stood outside the boarding house, her satchel heavy with the journal, the pocket watch, and the pickaxe. The sky was a pale gray, the clouds low, as if Hollow Bell was holding its breath. The bell tower stood silent, its iron bell still, but Clara felt its gaze like it was waiting for her next move. Jonah joined her, his face etched with exhaustion, his lantern already lit despite the dawn. He hadn't spoken much since last night's encounter with Caleb, but his eyes carried a weight that matched her own. They both knew today was different. The mine, the door, the truth, it was all waiting. They set out for the mine, the trail familiar now, each step pulling Clara deeper into the mystery that had swallowed Elias. The prairie was quiet, the wind barely stirring the brittle grass, as if the land itself was wary. Clara's hand brushed the journal in her satchel, her brother's words looping in her mind. Asterisk, it's a door. It's angry. Asterisk. Caleb's warning echoed too, his hollow eyes and cryptic words about the door choosing her. She didn't know what it meant, but the pull was undeniable, like a thread tied to her heart, drawing her back to the mine. Jonah broke the silence as they neared the entrance. You don't have to do this, Clara. Whatever's behind that door, it's taken enough already. She met his gaze, her voice steady, despite the fear coiling in her gut. Elias is in there, Jonah. Or the reason he's gone is. I'm not turning back. Jonah nodded, his jaw tight, and lit the lantern. The mine's mouth yawned before them, darker today, the air thick with that metallic tang. They stepped inside, the tunnel walls closing around them, the lantern's light barely pushing back the shadows. The carved bell on the wall seemed to pulse as they passed, its crack wider, jagged, like a wound that wouldn't heal. Clara's skin prickled, but she kept moving, her hand on her revolver, the journal a steady weight in her satchel. They reached the chamber with the rock pile, the gap they'd cleared yesterday still open, the stone door visible at the tunnel's end. Its symbols shimmered in the lantern's glow, twisting into shapes that made Clara's head ache, faces, hands, a cracked bell. The whispers started again, soft at first, weaving her name with Elias's, curling through the air like a lullaby. She froze, her breath shallow as the voices grew clearer. Not just her name now, but words, fragmented and urgent. Asterisk, open it. Find him. No. Jonah set the lantern down, his hands shaking. You hear it, don't you? Clara nodded, her eyes locked on the door. It's calling us. Like it called Elias? She stepped through the gap, Jonah close behind, the tunnel narrowing as they approached the stone slab. It was larger up close, its surface cold, the symbols carved deep, as if etched by something other than human hands. Clara's fingers hovered over them, drawn to their strange warmth, but she pulled back, remembering Jonah's warning. You touch it, you're giving it what it wants. Instead, she knelt, searching the base for any sign of Elias, any clue to what he'd found. Her fingers brushed something in the dirt, a small, tarnished locket, its chain broken. She pried it open, her heart lurching. Inside was a tiny sketch, Elias's work, showing a woman with green eyes. Her mother. Clara's throat tightened, her eyes burning as she clutched the locket. "He was here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Right here." Jonah's hand rested on her shoulder, his voice low. "Clara, we need to be careful. This place, it's alive today." She stood, the locket in one hand, the journal in the other, her gaze fixed on the door. The whispers grew louder, a chorus now, not angry but pleading, pulling her closer. She stepped forward, her hand inches from the stone, when a shadow moved at the tunnel's edge. Clara spun, her revolver drawn, but it was Caleb, his thin frame half lit, his eyes glinting with something wild. "You're here," he said, his voice raspy, almost reverent. "The door's been waiting." Clara lowered her gun but kept her grip tight. "What's behind it, Caleb? What took Elias?" Caleb's lips curled, a ghost of a smile. Not took, kept. "He's still here, Clara. Part of it now. You can join him if you want. Just open it." Jonah stepped between them, his voice sharp. "Enough, Caleb. She's not like you. She don't belong to this place." Caleb's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She does now. The bell chose her, like it chose Elias, like it chose me." Clara's heart pounded, the locket heavy in her hand. "I'm not opening anything till I know what's on the other side." Caleb laughed, a dry, hollow sound that echoed off the walls. "You already know. You feel it. The truth. The pain. Everything he left behind. It's waiting for you." The whispers surged, her name a chant now, the symbols on the door glowing faintly, like embers. Clara's hand trembled, drawn to the stone, but Jonah grabbed her, pulling her back. "Don't," he said, his voice urgent. "Not yet." Caleb stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "You'll come back, Clara. You can't help it. The door knows your heart." Before she could respond, Caleb slipped into the shadows, his footsteps fading. The whispers quieted, but the air felt heavier, the door's pull stronger. Clara clutched the locket, her mind spinning. Elias was here, or had been, and the door held the answer. She looked at Jonah, her voice firm. "Tomorrow we're coming back. We're opening it." Jonah's face was grim, his eyes haunted. "You're sure?" She nodded, the locket and journal grounding her. "I'm sure." As they left the mine, the whispers followed, faint but persistent, like a promise. The bell chimed once as they stepped into daylight, its note lingering, calling her back to the door, to Elias, to the truth she couldn't escape. The dawn was a faint bruise on the horizon as Clara and Jonah approached the mine for the last time. Hollow Bell lay silent behind them, the bell tower a dark sentinel under the gray sky. Clara's satchel was heavy with Elias's journal, the pocket watch, and the locket, each item a tether to her brother, pulling her toward the stone door. The air was thick, the prairie still, as if the world was holding its breath. Jonah walked beside her, his lantern unlit, his face set like a man marching to his fate. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Today they would face the door, and whatever lay beyond it. The mine's entrance loomed, its darkness deeper than before, the metallic tang sharper, almost alive. Clara's hand rested on her revolver, not for courage but for habit, as they stepped inside. The tunnel felt different today, the walls tighter, the air pressing against her skin like a warning. The carved bell on the wall seemed to pulse as they passed, its crack wide and jagged, as if it might split apart. Clara's heart pounded, but she kept moving, the whispers starting soft and low, weaving her name with Elias's, a chorus that grew clearer with every step. They reached the chamber, the rock pile cleared, the stone door fully exposed. Its symbols shimmered in the dim light Jonah's lantern cast, twisting into shapes that tugged at Clara's memory. Elias's smile, her mother's eyes, moments she'd buried deep. The whispers were louder now, not pleading, but urgent, calling her closer. She clutched the locket, its broken chain cool against her palm, and stepped toward the door. Jonah grabbed her arm, his voice low. "Clara, you can still walk away." She met his gaze, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "I came for Elias. I'm not leaving without him." Jonah's hand fell, his eyes haunted but resigned. "Then we do this together." Clara nodded, her fingers tracing the locket as she faced the door. The symbols glowed faintly, their patterns shifting like water, forming a cracked bell, then her brother's face, then nothing at all. The whispers surged, a chorus of voices, some familiar, some strange, all pulling her forward. She reached out, her hand inches from the stone, when a shadow moved at the chamber's edge. Caleb stepped into the light, his eyes wild, his voice a rasp. "You're here. It's time." Clara's hand froze, her revolver half drawn. "What's behind it, Caleb? Tell me now." Caleb's lips curled, a ghost of a smile. You. Everything you've lost. The door keeps what it takes, but it gives too. Open it, Clara. See." Jonah stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Caleb, stop. You know what this does. You've seen it." Caleb's eyes didn't leave Clara. "She's different. The bell chose her, like it chose Elias." Clara's chest tightened, the locket heavy in her hand. She looked at the door, its symbols pulsing, the whispers now a single voice, Elias's, soft and clear, saying her name. Her hand trembled, but she pressed it to the stone, the surface warm, almost alive. The symbols flared, the whispers silent, and the door shuddered, a low rumble filling the chamber. Dust sifted from the ceiling as the stone began to slide, revealing a darkness deeper than the mine itself. Clara's breath caught, her heart pounding as she peered into the void. Shadows moved within, not shapes but feelings, grief, hope, regret, all swirling together. And then a figure, faint at first, stepping forward. Elias. His face was as she remembered, his crooked smile unchanged, but his eyes were distant, like he was caught between worlds. "Clara," he said, his voice soft, echoing in her mind. "You found me." Tears stung her eyes, her voice breaking. "What happened? Why didn't you come back?" Elias's smile faded, his form flickering. "I wanted to. The door, it showed me everything. Our past, our pain. I thought I could fix it, bring it all back. But it keeps you, Clara. It holds on." She stepped closer, her hand reaching out, but he raised a hand, stopping her. "Don't cross. You can't come back." Jonah's voice was urgent behind her. Clara, step back. Now. Caleb laughed a hollow sound. She can't. It's hers now. Clara's eyes stayed on Elias, her heart aching. I just wanted to find you. You did, he said, his voice fading. Let me go. Live. The door rumbled again, the darkness pulling at Elias, his form dissolving into shadows. Clara's hand dropped, the locket slipping to the ground. The whispers returned, softer now, not calling but releasing. The door began to close, the symbols dimming, the mind growing still. Clara stumbled back, Jonah catching her as the stone sealed shut, the chamber silent. Caleb was gone, his laughter lingering in the air. Clara clutched the journal, her brother's words all she had left. She looked at Jonah, her voice barely a whisper. He's gone. Jonah nodded, his eyes soft. You gave him peace, Clara. That's more than most get. They left the mine, the daylight harsh after the darkness. The bell chimed once as they stepped into the prairie, its note gentle, like a farewell. Clara didn't look back. She had her answer, and though it hurt, it was enough. Not all spirits seek to frighten. Some just wish to be remembered. If their tale lingered with you, let it rest with your breath. Sleep well tonight. And if you hear a whisper in your dreams, maybe it's just the end of the story.